The spirit of Martin Luther lives on today in Germany, and it resides firmly with the German Bishops' Conference. It's not surprising. After all, these are the same men who conspired to bring about the coming Amazon Synod, with its embrace of paganism, egalitarianism, and other Masonic values that stand opposed to the Catholic faith. And now the German bishops are at it again, sensing that now is a revolutionary moment in our civilization, and especially in the Church. At this moment, the German bishops are preparing for a revolutionary push in the Church in Germany that even Pope Francis has warned against, meaning that the Germans are pushing too hard, even for the so-called reformer pope. That should give pause to everyone watching. So let's go over what the only group in the Church that might be causing more harm than the Jesuits are planning to do. The Germans are, to put it in the most plain way to describe it, the Germans are pushing for democracy in the Church. They are creating what they are calling a Synodal Assembly to run the Church in Germany. This Synodal Assembly would create a synodal way of the Catholic Church in Germany, with the aim to address and clarify key issues such as authority and separation of powers, sexual morality, the priestly mode of life, women at the service of ecclesiastical offices, over the course of a 2-year revolutionary period. The Synodal Assembly would be given the authority to pass resolutions in the name of the Church in Germany. The Assembly will have up to 200 members, with the largest block, 70 people in number, coming from the Central Committee of German Catholics, or the ZDK. This is, to be clear, a synodal body of mixed laity and clergy with the power to rule over the German Church, to pass binding resolutions. And again, it would have the power to explicitly address governance of the Church, sexual morality, the nature and reality of the priesthood, meaning clerical celibacy, women's ordination, and other topics. Do you see a pattern emerging yet? Some people think that I and other people are crazy for saying that the Amazon Synod will have its effects felt around the world. Remember that the Amazon Synod is the brainchild of the same German Bishops' Conference, and the German bishops are now planning to push for exactly the same nonsense that they are pushing in the Amazon, but this time for Germany, and once the Germans adopt it, it will spread. Just wait and see. All members of the Synodal Assembly will have one vote. The priests and deacons and bishops of the Church will have the same voting power as the lay members of this body. Does anyone else remember how the Second Vatican Council called this the age of the laity? Well, here we are, folks, and you and I know that this is going to be terrible, with catastrophic consequences for the Church. One of the hallmarks of modernism is the push for democracy within the Church, which is itself a facet of the heresy of Americanism, a heresy which states that the Church in a particular country should be different than the Church in the rest of the world. That heresy is called Americanism because it was, at first, an American idea, but has long since spread to the parts of the world with the most corrupt clergy. It is the spirit behind the push for synodalism, and it is most virulently present in this push by the Germans for a lay-governed church in Germany that will promote heterodox ideals, that will be a clear break with the rest of the Church. If this body isn't going to produce schism, I don't know what else can or will. I'm going to quote directly from a piece over at the Catholic News Agency website on this story, and it was written by Ed Condon. This details Pope Francis's response, and it's pretty rich, all things considered. Quote, in June, Pope Francis issued a letter to the entire Church in Germany, warning the bishops against plans and mechanisms which could prove anything but helpful for a common path for the Church. The Pope said that any synodal path would need to be the subject of careful reflection. What it means concretely and how it develops will certainly have to be considered even more deeply, the Pope wrote, reminding the Germans that synodality means going out together with the whole Church under the light of the Holy Spirit. Francis warned that the synodal perspective does not resolve opposites or confusions, nor does it subordinate conflicts to the decisions of a good consensus that compromise faith to the results of censuses or surveys relating to this or that subject. Despite the Pope's call for a deeper reflection on synodal mechanisms and a focus on faithful evangelization, senior sources in the German Bishops' Conference told Catholic News Agency that the conference is now in the final stages of completing the governing document. End quote. In other words, this isn't the kind of synodality that Francis has been pushing for, evidently, It can only be described as such a serious error on the part of the Germans that even this Pope can't endorse it. Let that sink in. Now, if you had to guess which German cardinal was behind this, if I told you that it was Cardinal Marx, would you be surprised? Probably not. I wasn't surprised to see that he was taking a central role in developing the schism. And to eliminate any doubt that these maniacs want to push the errors of the Amazon Synod on the rest of the Church, they are timing the release of this working group study on women's ordination, clerical celibacy, and sexual morality in general to coincide rather perfectly with the Amazon Synod's release of similar resolutions. Ain't this grand? Francis apparently has said that the push for married priests in the Amazon shouldn't be the main thrust of that synod, but the German bishops have already openly said that once the Amazon gets the go-ahead for ordaining married men, that they will ask for permission to implement the same errors in their dioceses. Again, quoting Ed Condon's piece, where the author quotes a German bishop named Franz Josef Bode, quote, Bode said in a 2018 interview that if the priestly ordination of married men is authorized for remote regions, German bishops will insist on the same authorization. This is obvious, Bode said at the time. The bishop said that pastoral emergency in Osnabrück, his diocese, and other German dioceses, is different but also very severe. Bishop Franz Josef Overbeck of Essen, who also serves as president of Adveniat, the church in Germany's aid organization for Latin America, has called the Amazon Synod a point of no return for the church, and that nothing will be the same as it was after the Synod. End quote. And he's right, and that was kind of the point in calling the Amazon Synod in the first place. As I've said elsewhere, it's clearly designed to enable the various national conferences of bishops around the Western world to have an excuse to implement errors, like they did with the abomination known as communion in the hand, and removal of altar rails, or the imposition of girl altar boys, or the destruction of the liturgy broadly. The revolution continues, and predictably a German named Marx is at the center of it. And to prove that this aim was to spread the revolution globally, here are the words of another German bishop, Bishop Close, on essentially rejecting Pope Francis's rather common-sense directive that the Germans must remain in communion with the rest of the Catholic Church. Quoting Martin Luther Jr., "It is not right to use the level of the global Church as an excuse not to comprehensively face concrete problems on the ground," he told members as he recommended ZDK participation in the Synodal Assembly. "This must not become a self-serving attempt to justify the Church's behavior. It lives from the impulses of those people who strive to present the gospel of Jesus in their concrete situations." End quote. Somewhere Pope Pius X is smiling sadly at that statement. And yeah, I guess the faith isn't concrete enough for these maniacs, but to prove that this push is for global revolution in the Church, the bishops of Germany plan to make their decisions and binding resolutions public in dozens of printed languages. What would be the point of that if not to export their revolution? And of course they're doing it in the name of reading the gospel and the signs of the times. I'd call that an insult to every faithful Catholic trying desperately to keep the flame of the faith alive. But in these increasingly dark days, the gospel is being abused more and more to promote all manner of error and the values of the world writ large. If you've ever wondered what the triumph of those who wrote the permanent instruction of the Alta Vendita might look like, you really only need to look at the German Bishops' Conference today to get an idea. Lord, forgive them, for they know not what they do. I'm Anthony Stine. Ave Maria.